628 pages. That is the final version of the Biden COVID relief bill that will be passed in identical form by the Senate and the House of Representatives. Speaker Nancy Pelosi has scheduled the bill for a vote in the House tomorrow. In tonight's episode of What's in the Bill, we are focusing on one of the underreported sections, the education section, which runs from pages 33 to 59. And those 26 pages deliver $170 billion of COVID relief support for schools from kindergarten through universities. Most of the spending, nearly $130 billion, is to help K through 12 classrooms and schools reopen safely. The bill includes funding to upgrade school ventilation systems, reduce class sizes, enhance social distancing in schools, provide personal protective equipment, hire additional staff to care for students' health, and monitor COVID safety protocols in schools. Republicans say schools should just reopen. Joe Biden and the Democrats say schools should reopen carefully and safely, and they're going to need federal support to do that. And now, Democrats are on the verge of delivering that support. Joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Jahana Hayes of Connecticut. She is a member of the House Education and Labor Committee, and she was named National Teacher of the Year in 2016. Also joining us, Democratic Congressman Jamal Bowman of New York. He is Vice Chair of the House Education and Labor Committee and was an educator for 20 years before being elected a member of Congress. And let me begin with Congresswoman Hayes and what you're focusing on in those education provisions and what are the most important provisions for the classroom.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And that National Teacher of the Year never gets old. But for me, from the very beginning, I was pushing for schools to reopen safely and for us to make sure that funding levels would not be cut so that social workers and support service personnel and all of those people that are necessary to meet students who are returning from the most traumatic experiences of their lives. I think this bill also does something that's a little different, and it has a mandatory 20% set aside to address long-term learning loss. And that's what lots of people are talking about. Kids have been out of school for a year. We have to close those gaps and just address some of the equity issues that we all knew were present even pre-pandemic. So I'm very excited about the provisions that we fought really hard for that are a part of this bill.
Congressman Bowman, what are you looking at in the bill? You actually ran a school, and so you have the administrative experience about all these issues like the ventilation system and stuff that it's beyond the jurisdiction of individual teachers.
Absolutely. So I would be working very closely with the custodians in my school to make sure the ventilation systems and the HVAC systems are up to par. But I also work very closely with teachers, and focusing on lowering class size is going to be critical, to Jehana's point, to address the learning loss that took place during this time. So we're going to need to hire more teachers. We're going to need to hire teachers' assistants to give students the individualized and small group support that they need to catch up academically. I also want to mention, and a lot of people don't talk about this, we need to make sure that we bring play, physical education, sports, music, and the arts into our schools. If we bring these things into our schools, it helps with overall academic learning. It also helps deal with the social and emotional trauma that our kids have dealt with over the past year. So if I was still running a school, I would be super excited at this point to bring in these resources to help my students and teachers and families.
Congresswoman Hayes, I hesitate to mention it, but all three of us have public school teaching experience. It was one of the first jobs that I did in Boston, but I didn't commit to it as a career the way you did, but it does leave me in awe of a Teacher of the Year. And I want to ask you a question for the parents out there who know their kids have fallen behind, who have been watching them fall behind, especially kids who aren't wired to the internet as well as they could be or at all, and have been losing ground. What would you tell parents they should be looking for and they should be asking for in their schools to get their kids back on track?
Well, first of all, teaching was the best experience I could have ever had coming into this job because in the classroom, every child is your child. There are no Republicans and Democrats. But for many parents, they may feel like the school knows what's best and they're not really sure what questions to ask or how to elevate their voices. I would encourage them to just ask the questions, become active partners in your children's education, express your concerns. I was very concerned at the beginning of this pandemic about parents who had little or no digital skills actually being required to log their kids on and to assist them in that way. I think we really need to have ongoing professional development, even for parents and families, so that they can be active partners in their children's learnings. But just ask questions, even if it seems like a silly question or something that you feel like you should know. Teachers are happy to engage with you, to include you in your child's learning. And I think it's going to take the entire village to get our kids back on track.
Congressman Bowman, as someone who's run a school and then you suddenly find yourself writing legislation to help school systems, to help schools, to help universities, to help the entire educational system, what was your assessment of who you were working with? Suddenly, here you are in the government with the people who haven't had your job, who haven't run schools, and yet they've been legislating for the benefit of the field that you were in. Did you feel that the people you were working with in the House and the Senate, staff, members of the committee, had the right kind of information and orientation about what they were working on?
Well, I have to say, being here with Jehana makes it a lot easier because we've both been in public schools for a very long time, so we speak the same language. Rep. Takano from California also used to be a teacher. He understands, he speaks the same language. And yes, my background as an administrator and a teacher is helping me now because I have to educate some of my colleagues on some issues that are very paramount in this moment as we deal with the global pandemic. For example, you know, the Department of Education decided to not grant waivers to states in terms of not administering the standardized test this year. And that's a decision that I do not agree with. Our kids are dealing with the biggest trauma of their lives. They've dealt with gaps in learning where they've been pulled in and out of schools, haven't had access to remote learning, and now we're asking them to take state standardized tests. And that's just unacceptable. And one last point, what Jehana mentioned about parents asking questions, that is key. Parents, teachers, and students are like the holy trinity in our schools. They work in collaboration to enhance the learning of students and enhance support for parents. And that's where our focus needs to be. And that's what I try to share with my colleagues in the House.
Congresswoman Hayes and Congressman Bowman, I cannot thank you enough for allowing me to spend a few minutes in the teacher's room with you tonight. This really is an honor to have you join us. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.